All right, here we go. Our next task is we will create a checkbox. We have our design here. We need to create a component, add it to Storybook. It's going to support all the required sizes. It's going to accept a text label, and it will support all required states. So let's check out our Figma design here. Look at our UI kit. So we got two sizes, three different states, unchecked, checked, partly checked. We got our text labels and our different dynamic states. We got a default, if the user hovers, if there's a focus, and our disabled. All right, let's take all this and get to work. All right, so let's look at what we did. Here is our checkbox component, and it's an uncontrolled component, meaning we're not going to have React control the state. And you'll see here that we have an input element of type checkbox that's wrapped in a label. And we wrapped it in a label so that we can add text to it, but also so that that text can be clickable as well. So you'll see the pointer up there. Now I can just click the text. Without it, I would only be able to click the checkbox itself. Input element has a couple attributes, checked and disabled, but one of the attributes it does not have is the indeterminate state. That is a property of it, but not one that we can directly interact with. We have to use JavaScript to change that. And for that, we need the help of the useRef hook. And useRef is like tagging an element. So tagging cattle or tagging a sea tortoise, right? In an aquarium, we'll have a sick turtle and come and fix it up and tag it and send it out to sea. And now it can watch it. And every time something happens or wants to check in on it, they know exactly where it's at and they can go and find them and make changes to that tortoise, right? Well, that's the same thing. That's what we're doing here. We're putting a reference on our input, and so that we can then use JavaScript to make changes to that input element. And we can do that through the use effect hook. Use effect will allow us to interact with third parties, in this case, the browser DOM. So when the checkbox renders, if at any time our indeterminate state changes, then we can act upon that. In this case, what we're doing is we're just toggling the values between true and false. One thing to notice too is that we set up our types here. I hard coded them out. Later on, I realized I probably could have just used the default settings here. That definitely would have cleaned up some code here. In that case, we wouldn't have the indeterminate parameter here. And with that, we would have to change some code here. So essentially, here we're hard coding it to false. Down here, we would have to evaluate it. If it's null, then we'll set it to false. Otherwise, we'll take its current state and then assign that value. So basically using the nullish coalesce. like this. So if the indeterminate exists and it's not null or undefined, then we'll set this property to this new value. Otherwise, then we would give it a false value. So that's the change that we would have to make. But we'll keep it like this for the time being. Another point of note is when we wanted to test it, we created in Storybook, our default included just the arguments themselves. The situation we came across though is that essentially what Storybook does is anything you set inside the arguments blocks you from interacting with it on the screen. So when I set check to false here, without the render property here, we would not be able to interact with the checkbox on the screen. So if I say that, and you'll notice I can't make any changes to the checked state. And that's because essentially Storybook has blocked your access to it. So how can we do that? Well, with a little bit of research, I found that we can add a property and then this function will run, giving us access to the screen so that we can interact with it on the screen as well in the controls. So that's good. The You'll see down here we have the basics with the label, we have the different sizes, disabled state, hover state, and focus state. And you'll see these down here. Here's our default. Here's our checkboxes in the different states with the label here. So we have the different sizes, small and medium in the different states. We have the disabled state. You'll notice that we cannot click. That is not allowed. The hover state gives us the border and the background color. And the focus state gives us a box shadow. How does that look? The small checkbox is the default, and then we also have the medium. The label is given a display inline flex, and that's because otherwise display flex will occupy the whole entire line. Inline flex will only give us the necessary space. So when we look here, we don't have a pointer, right? I can move across the screen and there's no pointer. The only pointer is on the text itself. But if I switch to flex, and it updates, and now my pointer is seen all the way across the line. So we follow the Figma designs. The input, we remove the native styling and we give it our own custom styles. We do that through appearance none. The checkboxes themselves are used by importing SVG files. There's the check, there's the minus. After completing this, I thought a better way for optimization would be to not make calls back to the server for the images, but to hard code them inside. You can do that several ways. We could do them here with the data, or we could hard code them here as elements, and then we would visibility, showing and not showing. That would be a couple ways in which we could do that. So our CSS looks for the check state, the indeterminate state, disabled state, and makes the appropriate changes that is necessary. And there you have it. We have a checkbox that is small and medium that can be checked and unchecked, disabled, and shown indeterminate. Now, the indeterminate state is mostly used for groups of checkboxes. So even though I can change the indeterminate state myself, there's no way to change it through interaction with the checkbox itself. We would have to set up a controlled component that will watch for changes of state. And when one of the checkboxes in the group is adjusted, then the grouped checkbox will change to indeterminate. And if all the checkboxes are checked, then the grouped checkbox will change to a check state. That is something definitely we could add to this task, but that was not part of the accepted criteria. So we just did what we were asked to do. And there you have it.